Welcome, friends. Welcome to another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc, and here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do in-depth interviews with individuals that are doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing, spirituality, and social transformation. I'm very excited about today's show. I am positive that today's show will touch all three of those areas: healing, spirituality, and social transformation. My special guests today are Clayten Steadman and Jeff Stegman. They are the founders and principals of the company that I just call FLFE. Some people call it Fluffy. And basically what they're doing is they have discovered or tapped into a way to access the quantum field, and then I would guess through quantum entanglement, they're able to harness that energy and consciousness and direct it to very specific places on the planet, and they're able to titrate, if you will, the particular frequencies that they want to focalize. So that people are uplifted without being totally blown away and thrown into a healing crisis or an existential crisis. So it's a powerful possibility that I was introduced to several weeks ago through my dear friend Regina Meredith, who's a very discerning person who spoke in glowing terms about the work that Jeff and Clayten are doing. And so they're very generous people, and one of the things you'll find out later today is that they offer a 15-day free trial. In fact, back-to-back, 2 different 15-day free trials so that people can experience the work before they decide if they want to invest in it or share it with other people. So with that as a very, very brief introduction, welcome Clayten and Jeff to Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul.
Thank you, Dr. David. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah, appreciate your time, Dr. David. Thank you.
Okay, so those of you that have followed my work for a while know that what I'm all about is I consider myself a practical visionary. I consider myself a contemporary mystic. So basically what I'm all about, and I'm all about freedom. So, you know, we live in a free will zone primarily here in the universe, and that creates some incredible opportunities and challenges. And we're learning about how to be a better steward of that divine gift. And at any rate, what I'm all about is I'm all about the seamless integration of the realization of unity on one hand, but also the very precise application of unity to specifics, to individuals, to unique opportunities, so that there's a, you know, there's an old, I don't know if it's a Buddhist expression, the idea that if you really knew a blade of grass, you would know the universe. So it's that idea that the one is expressed through all its unique manifestations. And we live in a culture where we were kind of thrown into a different paradigm, where over here you have God or infinity or whatever, and then over here you have human beings in the physical world, and we're kind of thrown out of the garden because we did something wrong, and there's this huge split. And we live inside that split until we wake up from that illusion. And we're waking up from that illusion. Quantum physics is teaching us that. We're opening up to the perennial philosophies, the spiritual teachings of all time. And so what is exciting to me is that Clayten and Jeff embody a consciousness, a stewardship that is very resonant with the sacred and the one. And at the same time, there's a application of the kind of the combination of human intention and very precise technology, so that so that it becomes usable, so that the quantum field becomes accessible in a way that is very precise, that can uplift human beings. And that's how I see it. But I'm just beginning to tune in to what this is all about. And I know my understanding will progress as the conversation unfolds. So the way that I like to start these shows is I like my guests to tell their story in a purposeful way so that the viewers and listeners can do two things. One is they can begin to emotionally connect with you and bond with you. And the other is that I think it creates an empowering context for when we get into a deeper discussion about the work. It puts it into a story that makes it more human and makes it more real for people. So in no particular order, I haven't done a lot of interviews with two people, so logistically I'm kind of be winging it here. So whoever wants to go first, go ahead and please introduce yourself in the sort of the spirit that I was suggesting, and then we'll have the other person introduce themselves. And then unless I have a burning question, I'll just let you guys go until you're done. And then we'll see where the conversation wants to go. So take it away, you guys.
Well, this is Jeff Stegman. I'll start. Yeah, thank you, Dr. David. It's interesting that you said freedom. You know, that freedom is one of the things that's very important to your work. We look at the FLFE high consciousness field as a freedom zone, as increasing freedom. You know, our mission is to support the optimal, you know, conditions for the evolution of consciousness. You know, in an economized society where, you know, we have to work and take care of our lives. So we've become very proficient at creating high consciousness fields, you know, to put it simply. And, you know, these fields support us to rise in consciousness, which you could say is an increase in our freedom, an increase in our freedom from things that restrain us, you know, in rising, you know, our own patterns, our own beliefs, our own past, but also factors in the environment. So it's interesting, the story of FLFE, it really started as a service project. Clayten had discovered a group of inventors that were looking to create a free energy machine where they could generate electricity from available energy in the environment. So the setup was very similar to Nikola Tesla's work, and definitely used pieces of that. There's high-speed alternating current going through plates, stacks of plates, and coils and sacred shapes, geometries. And that machine, you know, was taking up virtually a whole house of high-speed alternating current. And Clayten can go into more detail about what those early days were like. But when Clayten and I discovered it, we were working together, and Clayten was assisted me to raise my own level of consciousness. And we discovered that this technology, we could create an entangled, as you said, Dr. David, an entanglement between a very high field that's created in this machine and a property or place anywhere in the world, whether it's a legal address or coordinates. And so we started meeting multiple times a week in 2012, looking for those places in the world that are sort of key points or levers that, you know, in a particular continent, if you raise the level of consciousness of this one area, then the whole continent would go up, and it would create more freedom for everyone there. And for instance, there was a place in the Middle East that was primarily for curse. The town was for curses. People would, if they wanted to curse someone, they would put a curse on someone. They would go to that town and they would buy a curse. And so it, for centuries, that's the primary function there. So that was, for instance, one of the places that we discovered if we raised that, the entire area would go up. You want to talk more about that, Clayten? I don't want to monopolize. Let's go back and forth.
Sure. Yeah. Jeff and I came together through my work in helping people raise their consciousness. I came across Dr. David Hawkins' work in 2004. And at that time, I'd been in the coaching. I had a coaching practice for about 10 years. It was my 9th year, actually, into the 10th. And I was specializing in business as a spiritual path. I was very active in an Eastern-based philosophy for 11 years before that, while I was working for private schools. And like many of your listeners, Dr. David, and probably yourself, you got on the path pretty early. And it wasn't necessarily, say, a spiritual focus as much as a personal development focus, just trying to improve myself and create the life that I thought was possible for myself and others. So Jeff and I were working together, and we came across this technology. I came across this technology in my research, testing the level of appropriateness of different technologies to heal, because I was experiencing a health crisis at the time. And there's many different waves out there in the world, or frequencies, that are used to assist people to evolve. And we've found that with the technology of FLFE, we're able to incorporate multiple frequencies over time. But we found a way to use one of the most universal frequencies and modify it through programs that are written language that we put into call it the thought machine or the prayer machine. And it's able to allow us, as David said, to titrate the conditions that are optimal for that person without throwing them into healing crisis or overwhelming them. So it's a unique combination of existing technologies and a few probably new applications of the technologies, and maybe 1 or 2 new inventions. So Jeff and I were working on this service project, and we would calibrate the level of consciousness of different parts of continents, as you said. And there's something called the critical factor, where you can put the least amount of effort in and get the most amount of change in a system. So we all have a critical factor in our lives. And when Jeff and I were working together, I was doing some coaching with his company. We would calibrate the critical factor in our consciousness, because mine and Jeff's, we kind of knew each other well enough that you end up sharing those type of things. And it's kind of the tipping point in the system. So once we found the tipping point in the continents, we found that the application of a relatively small amount of energy could have a large gain. And that was what we did during the pre-2012 event that happened on December 21st, when the Mayan calendar was ending and we weren't sure what was going to happen with the world. There's lots of people doing prayer circles and different ceremonies to try to make the best of that transition. So we supported that just quietly behind the scenes. We had hundreds of locations on, I think, by that time. I said just to hand it back to you, Jeff. We're typically kind of going back and forth with each other, unless David has a big question. We can go a little deeper into our personal backgrounds, but
one thought that's coming up for me is, have you experimented? It's something that I'm moved to do, and I will do it. Is, have you experimented with directing the energy to a certain location, knowing that at that location there's going to be a group of people coming together for to hold a specific intention for some type of uplifting intention. In other words, have you experimented with combining the power of what you're doing with the power of conscious group intention?
Well, I can answer that. I can start, Dr. David. Yeah, that's an interesting question. And we started out the business, so we did the service work, and that was largely geographical and worldwide. And then once we started FLFE, so that people could raise the level of consciousness of their own homes or businesses, we had from the beginning what we now call a pay it forward, or PIF, where we give people who sign up a chance to do a free application of the high consciousness field in a simpler form without so many of the programs, and at 500 on the Hawkins map. And when we initially started that, it was meant to be for places of worship, because of the effect of the field on groups who are in prayer. The FLFE service, as it is, clears the negative history on a location. So, those negative thought forms or patterns or energies that may be there from, could be, into, prehistory times, that the memory of that stays in the location. Those thought forms can come up and be disruptive in our evolution and in groups coming together for an intention. So that was, from the beginning, we wanted to support people to be, to connect to divinity in their own way, to be in a high consciousness field that supports that. And that continues today. When someone signs up for the service, after they go through the free trials and they sign up, they get this pay it forward, and they can put it anywhere on the world. They can, give an address. It could be, a government office. It could be a local church or synagogue, or, or it could be their parents. So that's part of the service. It's part of how we pay it forward, or increase the consciousness.
I have an interesting story about that. I'm a paid subscriber, and I have a dear friend who has 2 children who are in a particular private school. And that private school was going through a challenging period, and people were getting a little bit reactivated. And so I felt moved to give my pay it forward to this particular school. And I told my friend that I was doing that. And her kids are very conscious, and she shared with them what was happening. And I think it was over the weekend that started. And then on Monday of this week, there was a teacher who very often tends to get rattled and upset in certain situations. And one of the children noticed that she didn't get upset. So that was very cool. Have you guys experimented with the possibility of targeting, instead of a particular location, targeting an individual? I mean, I know you can sort of do that with your cell phone work, because people can have their cell phones close to them all the time. But is there any reason why the focalization couldn't be targeted to an individual as opposed to a static location?
Well, we're creating a field, whether it's a field at a property within the legal boundaries, or a field around a cell phone. And we've just chosen to go that path where the person in the field is benefiting, rather than, having the service focused on the person. So it means that everyone in that field benefits from it. So, the plants, the animals, the children, the visitors. So that was why we felt it was more, you could say, more inclusive. Could be one of the reasons why.
How large is the range?
Well, for the property, it's to the legal limits. But what happens is that the property's at 560 on the Hawkins map, and then, you know, the nearby properties could be 500. The average level in North America is 420. And on the Hawkins map, each point upwards is 10 times more energy present, you know, a 10 times higher vibration. So it's a logarithmic scale. So, you know, 10 points is a lot, 100 points is huge. So it's sort of from the property, it sort of propagates out into the neighborhood. It tends to go along walls as well, you know, like sheetrock or other kinds of rock walls. You know, it may extend further along those types of structures.
What about the cell phone?
Yeah, the cell phone field, I'll finish that, Clayten, and then you can jump in. It's 300 feet around the cell phone is at a particular level of consciousness. Within 4 feet of the cell phone is 575 on the Hawkins map. And within that 4 feet are most of the programs supporting health and well-being. So it's so it's with the person all the time, and you just wouldn't want to go out 300 feet with those kind of programs. It would take a lot of energy from our system, because it is, like you said, calibrating or titrating for each person in that field, and it's really providing additional energy in that high consciousness field, but also these programs, as we mentioned, it's information in the field for the innate intelligence of the body to use, for optimal health.
Now, I probably should put in a disclaimer before my next question, a legal disclaimer, that we're not having a conversation between a patient and a private physician here. We're having a public conversation, and none of what I'm asking or saying is meant to imply the practice of medicine, or that anything you have to offer is diagnosing or treating disease. But with that disclaimer, do you get reports from individuals who are using your service about changes in their physical level of wellness that they're really enjoying and appreciating?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the disclaimer. We don't make any health claims, and we do have lots of anecdotal evidence, per se, or testimonials from people. One of the stories that comes to mind is a war veteran who was injured in service, and he was in chronic pain. And the only thing that he could find to eliminate his pain that wasn't a drug was the FLFE service. We have, lots of stories about people's general health improving, and some specific incidences where long-term and transient illnesses are alleviated, or the symptoms are alleviated. And the body's innate intelligence is really what we're focusing on. It's giving the body's innate intelligence more energy to do what it knows to do. It's just that there are conditions in the world, in our food system, in our environment, that make it more difficult for the body to have the optimal amount of energy that it could use to do the healing that it knows how to do. And so that's why when people go to these sacred sites and pilgrimage sites and the holy temples that are renowned for serendipitous healing experiences, those are high consciousness fields. So that's what people are experiencing in the FLFE environment. You're experiencing a high consciousness field. We do it through the use of technology and measurement of truth through Dr. David Hawkins' work of measuring levels of consciousness against a verified scale. And we focus on creating that optimal environment that the body can use, and its own intelligence does the work.
One of the things that's been a concern for me as a holistic doctor for the last 31 years, and been in the healing arts longer than that, is that it's much more challenging today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago to help people realize high levels of health. And I think a lot of that has to do with the toxic burden, especially genetically modified foods are really scrambling the energy field. The increased amount of chlorine and fluoride, the chemtrails, the exponential increase in EMFs, smart meters, reduction of minerals in the topsoil, the enormous number of vaccinations that young people are being given today, the xenoestrogens. There's a tremendous reduction in testosterone levels in men over the last several decades that's reaching really severe proportions right now in terms of the impact that that's having on the ability of men and women to relate in satisfying ways, and also just in terms of the ability to propagate the species. There's a tremendous estrogenization of the millennial generation, autism rates, etc. And of course, we do the best we can to help people. Have you considered using your technology to attempt to mitigate some of these root causes of dis-ease, in addition to what you're currently doing to buoy up the body, to buoy up the field around an individual or around a location? Is there anything that can be done directly sort of in the area of transmutation for these kinds of areas, or polluted streams, or areas where there have been a lot of underground nuclear explosions? Is there anything that can be done from that end to complement what you're currently doing, or is that a completely different animal?
No, I would say you're right on the money, right on the topic. Yeah, our focus is consciousness. Our focus is creating the optimal conditions for people to rise in consciousness. And as you've said so well there, there's many factors, many environmental factors that affect our health. And if we're unhealthy, rising in consciousness is much more difficult. And so we're looking to support, as Clayten said, the innate intelligence with the high consciousness field, more energy, and the mitigation of some outside influences is part of raising consciousness. The first one I mentioned earlier, was clearing the negative history of the land.
Yes.
Because there's all sorts of factors there that can create low consciousness fields and create thought forms that can really throw you off. But the other is EMFs and geopathic stress, which is recognized by some experts, and it may not be in mainstream science, but what we're seeing is there's environmental factors that can lower the level of consciousness of a place due to moving water, moving electricity, radioactivity, as you said, other types of factors, as well as the man-made type, EMF, Wi-Fi's, and cell towers, and the rest. So the current FLFE, when we look at properties, if a property doesn't come up to 560 on the Hawkins map and stay there 98% of the time, then we look for a cause. And we'll go to Google Maps and we'll look at what's happening, try to look at where the streams are and things are running. And, we're through testing and intuitive sensing, we'll try to determine what the issue is. And then once we discover that geopathic stress issue, we can generally take care of it. For instance, we've had underground streams under a property that then drop in a waterfall under the property, which pulls energy away and lowers the level of consciousness and creates a very toxic environment for the person. So we were able to add additional energy to that stream, and now any streams under any FLFE property, so that it's bringing more energy in and it's taking away. So we build those into the programs. So we have now, I think we're up to 30 or 31 different geopathic stress situations. And we're testing an EMF program. And we're doing a lot of research right now on all the different types of factors that affect the level of consciousness of a property and the health of a person. And we're looking to mitigate as many of those as we can to help create, a high consciousness zone that's free of those negative influences. So that's in testing right now, and we don't have a date yet for release, but that would come into the standard subscription.
Well, that's the part that's so exciting to me, is that when you discover a challenge like this, and then that leads you to more information in the solution, that it gets integrated into the standard fare. That's a very elegant model, and makes things so much simpler, because when you're dealing with the quantum field, there's the space of all possibility, and so it's not like somebody's going to need to buy this and 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 upsell this and upsell this. It's all there, and as we evolve, we can access in a timely, appropriate manner more of all there. And that's a wonderful way to work, and that's very exciting, and that's beautiful. I think one thing that might be useful, because there's probably viewers and listeners that don't know about David Hawkins' work in the Hawkins scale. And so if one of you would be willing to kind of do a Cliff Notes version summary, so that people have an appreciation when you say that the average person in this country is between 410 and 420, so they can have a reality on what that means. And when you say that that the property program is at 560, they know what that means. Or when you say the cell phone is at 575 within 4 feet, what that means, and what are the implications for consciousness and well-being. And also, maybe you can address the issue of the higher we go, the more conscientious we have to be about managing detoxification phenomena.
Why don't I'll start that one. The Hawkins Map of Consciousness is a map of consciousness created by Dr. David Hawkins. His first book is called Power versus Force. If you want to look that up, you might find it an interesting read. What Dr. Hawkins did was he discovered that kinesiology was a non-local phenomena. So what that means is that for many years, kinesiology was used, and it still is used, to test the level of appropriateness of supplementation. It's also used in chiropractic, of course, but we'll get to that next. So in supplementation, you would hold a supplement or a food in front of you, and not everybody's a good tester, but for those who are, your body will naturally move towards something positive, and it will naturally go away from something that's not positive for the body. And so that's the innate intelligence of the body that is connected to divinity at all times. So the possibility of kinesiology is to transcend the mind. And through a series of forming inquiries properly and having scales that are proven to be highly truthful and relevant to a situation, you can measure the level of consciousness or level of appropriateness of different food substances, different treatment protocols, et cetera, et cetera. So Dr. Hawkins found that when he was at a lecture, he noticed from his perspective that they were using it as a local phenomena, but nobody was talking it as a non-local phenomena. So that means non-locally means that, David, if you were a good kinesiologist, you could test the level of appropriateness of a food for me from your location, because we're all connected. That's non-locality. So with our work, we can test the level of consciousness of a property on the other side of the planet. And we can, for example, test what is the most appropriate level of consciousness for an environment to be at in our current society to optimize the conditions for evolving in an economized world where we have to go to work. That's why we chose the 560 number. So back to the Hawkins map, each level of consciousness is associated with a certain amount of electricity. In the back of Power versus Force, there is a chart called the Consciousness Compensation Chart, which explains the principle that one person, say at 500 on the Hawkins map, counterbalances for 600,000 people below 200 because of the power of the energy that they send out into the universe, which we're all connected to. So the Hawkins map of consciousness goes from 1 to infinity. Infinity would be God, the creator, divinity, depending on how you define creator and these terms. The human realm is from 1 to 1,000, and 1,000 would be the highest level of consciousness that a human being has ever been able to sustain. And that would be Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, some of these, classic avatars. 200 on the Hawkins map of consciousness is integrity. 500 is love. So the emotions below 200 are what we call negative, lack of a better word, or I guess catabolic. From 200 up, they're anabolic. And I've got the Hawkins map right here. And so this will give you a sense of below 200, you have these negative emotions such as anger is 150, fear is at 100, apathy is at 50. So when Jeff and I were calibrating these places on the planet, on each continent, we would sometimes find an area that was 50 or 80 or 100 because they've had perhaps a history of, as Jeff said, of being a place where people go to place curses on others, and there's families that have been doing that for generations and generations, or there's a condition in that area where there's tribal warfare, and people are going, and we've heard these stories where they go to villages and they steal children and make them child soldiers to fight in their war. Those are areas of just despair, and there's not much hope for people in those areas. So it's hard to have a higher level of consciousness. It's still possible, but very difficult. So as you go from 200, which is courage or integrity, up into 250, which is neutrality, 310, willingness, 400, reason, 500 is love, 550 is unconditional love, 600 is peace, the beginning of enlightenment, starts to ripen at 700 and goes right through to 1,000. So when we're looking at the principle of non-interference in gifting the PIF program, the Pay It Forward program, which actually, if you try FLFE and you pay for even a month, David, if you canceled your subscription, we would leave that Pay It Forward on for as long as we have the business, and probably the rest of our lives. So that's our way of being of service. And for us to be able to put that Pay It Forward program on any place on the earth, we have to have it at a level of consciousness that is in alignment with the law of non-interference. So when we were putting it on churches and synagogues and places of prayer, temples, sacred sites, pilgrimage routes. We had to calibrate that it was in the highest and best interest of all creation to have that 540 program that was at that time was 540 go to that place, because we were trying to create a condition of unconditional love in all places of worship, so that any teachings that were below the level of consciousness of unconditional love would start to be transformed. Now, we have to adhere to the law of non-interference, and we found that as the company was growing, we couldn't keep testing if it was permissible to have that level of consciousness on those places. At 500, we don't have to test anything ever. We can just put it on. At 540, we have to test it, and we have to retest it occasionally because we're karmically responsible for what we do. So that's a little bit more about the Hawkins map. I can go into more detail if you'd like, but that will give your listeners or your viewers a sense of why we don't put the properties at 800, because we could do that. It's just that when we're testing with kinesiology, and it's a very technical science, what's in the highest and best interest of all creation to fulfill the mission of creating the optimal conditions for the evolution of consciousness in an economized society, which is, we live in an economized society. 560 is the number that comes up as the optimal level. And so our goal is to have every subscriber's property at 560 98% of the time over a period of a week. And we're actually working on programs now that when we have a subscriber that perhaps tries the service and doesn't stay with us, that any negative conditions that were on the land are healed, so that the land will come back up to about the average of the country or higher. And we just had a property in Tennessee where there was a war on that property years and years and years ago. And well, the war in that area, including that property. And the property started at 150 before it went on FLFE. It could only go up to 320 with the programming we had. When the free trial ended, it went back to 180 because some of the land was cleared. And then we wrote a program for that. And we have other war zone programs, but we just didn't address this particular condition. And when we put that on, that program on the whole area, it was 370, 30 miles from the property, and the country is the United States. It should have been at 420. So the property actually went up to 420 in that whole area now. And that condition is, you know, I haven't tested it. I haven't taken it off and tested, but we believe it's going to be at 420 permanently now, unless something else happens, because it's currently occurring on the land. But that's the next level of our programming, is to try to not just create those conditions for our subscribers, but to heal the condition permanently, or as permanent as we can.
Thank you. And I want to make sure one of you addressed this issue of detoxification phenomena. You know, I was thinking when you were talking about something that Jesus was said to have said, where he said, I come not as the peacemaker, I come as the sword. Mm. And in other words, when he would enter into a system, some people would be very attracted to that vibration, and other people would be very frightened by it and run away or try to kill him or something like that. So it's his influence was very catalytic and very dynamic. And I was thinking as you were talking, as a higher frequency is introduced into a home or into another area, I would imagine that something similar is happening, and that I could see that it could catalyze a lot of very dynamic processes. I could see relationships changing. I could see people shifting jobs from one to another. I would imagine it's very dynamic on many levels, both in terms of the higher you go in terms of physical detoxification, but not just physical detoxification, that this has implications on many other levels as well, and that it would be valuable for people to have a greater understanding of this phenomena and this dynamic so they can more consciously participate in that type of a process, because that can be, that can be a very rocky ride through the rapids, especially if you have no framework for what is happening.
That's a great question. We do have resources in our website, in the Learning Center, for people that are in the field and for the first time. And there are many things happening. We also there's something called anti-stagnation that is one of the programs, and it's like similar to acupressure on an ongoing basis. So it's helping to move subtle energies in the body, and you're right, there are places we get stuck, and it might be a relationship, it might be a job, it might be other habits that we have that we'd like to get rid of or stop doing. And this clearing of those blockages can help things to move more quickly, and people are reporting a more rapid change in things they want to change. So there is a intentional component there. So if you know that's there, as we rise in consciousness, we see our subscribers, or people in the field, rise in consciousness by more than 12 points on the Hawkins Map in 90 days. And so those, each point up means you have 10 times more power to create your life, to create the reality that you want. So we're also people have the responsibility to manage their thoughts, their intentions, to be on, envisioning the life they want. But we build into the system as many you could call them safeguards or caveats, where for hydration and for the effects of rapid healing, you could say detoxification, where we want to keep it at a level where those things aren't debilitating for someone. So if someone is not hydrated well enough, certain of the important programs where innate intelligence is supported to, say, for instance, heal and clear the kidneys and liver. If they're dehydrated, or they're not hydrated to a certain level, that program turns down.
So there's like a governor.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's individual for the person, anyone in the field, because of, we know that people need to work. It's part of our mission in an economized society that, do you really feel better if you're tired and you can't get out of bed? We're looking for people to have a progressively positive experience with FLFE. So that's partly why we turn things down. And it may be still in the highest and best interest of all creation to rapidly heal, to rapidly change your life. But, like you said, it can be challenging.
Yeah, that's another elegant aspect of your model, is that there are these built-in safeguards. That's, I keep thinking of the word elegant, keeps coming up to me more and more. Could you give people a picture of exactly, like, if they were interested in taking the next step and experiencing these frequencies, just sort of like a checklist? What's the first thing they would do? What would they do then? Where would they go? What website? What decisions do they have to make? Mm-hmm. Just give people more of a reality on if we've got their attention and we've got their interest and we've built some trust and they're ready to take an action step. Make that real for people. What's the next step for people who are excited about this and are willing to put their toe in the water?
Sure. Yeah, as you mentioned, we do a free trial, and we do two free trials because people do need to try it and see for themselves, and trust themselves to sense, the difference. So the website is FLFE, and that's short for Focused Life Force Energy.net, FLFE.net. So if you go there, there's a button on the front page for free trial. And then when you go to the free trial section, you have a choice. You can do a free trial on your home, and you could do one on your cell phone. Now, the cell phone free trial is interesting as well because it's not only creating a field around the cell phone which goes with you, but we're raising the level of consciousness of the object itself, the cellular device, to 580 on the Hawkins map. And what we discovered is when you do that, all of the antennas, all of the pieces and parts of the cell phone are at 580, and now the emissions are harmonized and they're positive for life instead of negative. So that's another added piece of the cell phone it assists with the field being supportive of life and supportive for you. So we recommend people try both. Try the free trial on your property. The advantage of the free trial on the property is that it clears the negative history of the land in the buildings, where the cell phone doesn't do that. So that's a gift that we're giving with the free trial, is that people can put it on their property. They can clear the negative history of the land and buildings, and there's enough energy there for those 15 days and the programs that are there supporting the innate that at the end of the 15 days they're better off. You're better off than you were when you started. And so that's our gift. And if that's all you want to do, great. You could then do the free trial on the phone, and then you could choose if you wanted to continue on with the subscription. And there's lots of resources.
And then if you do continue with a paid subscription, currently you get one pay it forward opportunity that lasts for as long as you're in business.
That's correct.
And I think I spoke to Paula or someone else from your company that you guys are considering an option that people may be able to purchase more than one pay it forward without having to get a whole other subscription.
Yeah, that's not, we sort of tested into that as a possibility, and it turned out to not be in the highest and best interest to do that. But we are planning to give those occasionally to everyone.
Okay.
So that there could be additional opportunities to do that.
Beautiful.
For people. And so we're working on other ways to give those as a sort of an extra bit for when people perhaps renew an annual membership or something like that.
So for people that are finding out about this opportunity through this audio or video, is there a place in the sign-up process where they can say that they heard about it through Dr. David, or do they need to get a particular link from me to do that? Or how would you suggest that we track how people are finding out about this?
Yeah, the best way would be for you to register, and as a referral,
which I have
a link. Yeah, that's great. So if you put that link on your website, or it's part of these, then people could click on that link, and then you would be recognized as the referral. And Regina Meredith, for instance, is a referral partner, and you are as well. So it's part of our model as business as a spiritual path, that we want to support other people who are doing good work in the world, as you are, to with a referral commission. And it's part of us giving back rather than paying into the advertising system and spending our money that way.
One thing you guys don't know about me is when I was 22 years old, I was the youngest of 60 people that was selected to do a immersion 6-week residential program in in Vermont, where, as far as I know, it was the first attempt on the continent to integrate spiritual practices with best business practices.
Oh, wow.
And it was organized by a man named Marshall Thurber. And we had attracted, it was a vortex, we were attracting some very powerful people. We actually had in residence for about 4 days in that summer, we had Bucky Fuller. And there were some very high level people. You know, I've always felt that the creative spirit could come much more easily through private enterprise than through governments. And I've always been interested in creativity. And to me, creativity is about organizing physical and metaphysical resources in a way that compresses things so that you get the most bang for your buck. And because I'm on the light team and not on the dark team, dedicating this creativity to upliftment. And you know, I think capitalism and profit have gotten a really bad rap. And I think a lot of people who have concerns about profit and capitalism have never really experienced true profit and true capitalism, true free enterprise. And to me, capitalism in its purest form is voluntarism, is the freely entering into exchanges. And a lot of people think we have a society, they're sold a bill of goods, that that's the kind of society we have. And then the ills in our society are attributed to capitalism. But the kind of crony capitalism we have isn't what I'm talking about. And then again, the word profit that is associated with somehow taking advantage of others. But I think true profit comes from lowering costs, providing more value. And so I am also very conscious about the importance of having economic models that honor these principles and are based on win-win-win philosophies. And I think that's, you know, when I look at the low consciousness points in our world that are creating a drag on human freedom, you know, the ones that pop up for me immediately are our financial structures and our healthcare systems and our educational systems. And so many people's lives right now appear to be being dominated by the dysfunction in those systems. And if there are things we can do to begin to either shift those systems or create a parallel system that we can demonstrate that it works better, that tends to bring out the best in people instead of the worst in people, I think that's part of our service. I think that's part of our mission and substantiating the work.
We agree. There are evolving economic models in the world today, as there always been. There's always alternatives. Contributionism comes to mind as one right now that's gaining some momentum. And as we're deciding about how to run our business, and for us, the reason we chose to express this as a business is because we only have so many resources personally. And unless we have larger angel investors than the ones we currently have, we can only do so much with the technology to be in service. One of the things we have in the office right now, we have 15 people there and we'll have more as the company grows, is for people to talk to as they're experiencing these changes in consciousness, David, which you've alluded to. So we have trained staff that have been on their own spiritual path for significant amounts of time and are trained extensively. I mean, we spend a lot of money on training. They're trained to support people to, or as they go through these rises in consciousness. And these people need, people need to make a living. And the best way for us to spread God that expresses through technology, which it also does express through technology and through business, the best way for us to distribute this energy is through the business model. And we've tested, it's in the highest and best interest for us to just keep giving it away, which we did for a year. But there's only so much we can do unless we had the means to not have to make money. And so the most appropriate way for us to distribute the energy is through a business model. And then we went through all the variables we could find in business models and chose this business model. We test what's the highest and best priced, to charge. And we test everything with kinesiology, and we pray about how to run our business. And, we're very kind of deliberate about saying that it's business as a spiritual path. And we use muscle testing or kinesiology and that innate connection to divinity to guide us along the way. And one of the things we haven't mentioned today is we give between 90 and 98% of the energy that we generate from the technology away every day, and we have from day one. We have lots of service projects that we don't talk about. We do lots of things in the world, and we just do it because it's the right thing to do, and we have the energy to do it. It doesn't really take away from the business, but it doesn't mean we have to spend all that time and energy doing research on helping the planet and the plants and the people evolve in a way that we're never going to economize. We do it because we've been given the gift of this technology, and part of stewardship is to give back. And so we give a lot back, probably too much. We could have a much bigger business if we gave less, but it's so much fun to write a program and see the level of consciousness of the whole area go up, and then it's like, wow. Yeah, it's just such joy to do that. And we're helping millions of people, and lots of people are. I mean, you're helping people through these podcasts, David, in a way that may be economized to a degree, but it may not, and that's not the point. The point is that's what you're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, it's funny because my older son is very locked into the corporate world, and 3 years ago when I started my podcast project, he was very concerned that it wasn't monetizable. And I said, well, two things. First of all, sometimes things come back in ways that don't make linear sense. And, that in a holographic world, that happens all the time. And that's why judgment is always off the track. And the other reason was, the thing I told him is, I said, I have some gifts and talents and strengths and joys and interests that doing podcasts and then later videos fits right in for me, and it's not all about the money. I mean, I have to pay the bills, but I've always been very mission driven. And one of the things that I'm working on in my own personal growth now is opening up to the point where, as I'm mission driven, that my finances are not so dicey, that there's more comfort, there's more ease, there's more pleasure there. And And so I've done a lot of work over the last few decades to clear out the blockages to that. Some of them have been personal, some of them have been ancestral. You know, my parents were very traumatized by World War II. And so, you know, I grew up with a lot of those traumatic thought forms. And so I've done a lot of deep work to try to root that out, and then kind of felt like I'd gotten to a critical mass of rooting out my personal issues in that area. And then over the last year or two, I've been working more on with people that are helping me to clear out the ancestral patterns that are kind of like the base note for that. And I'm hoping that as I work more with your technology, that I can continue to take that to another level more and more. I feel like just in the last week or so, I feel like I've made some connections with people that have some connections to some wealthy light workers that might be possible patrons for me, because, you know, I'm out there playing at 100% all the time. And so I'm expanding my willingness to receive, to balance out the naturalness I feel about giving, to get to the point where I have that same naturalness about receiving and realizing that it's one. And this is deep work. This is very deep work, and I'm still in it. But I wanted to share that because your personal sharing catalyzed that personal sharing for me.
Yeah, thank you. You know, Jeff and I work a lot, and it's the most fun I've ever had doing this business. And I don't think the universe wants us to live in poverty. And so an abundant life is possible for everybody. And we recognize that volunteers contribute an incredible amount of resources to our society and have really been a cornerstone of the evolution of our world. If people only did something when they got paid, we wouldn't be where we are. You know, lots of people volunteer and do good works. We don't claim to be unique in that way. We see that in you, David. And appreciate what you said. It's, you know, you try to live your life according to what you interpret God's will is for you. I'll say I'll say that for myself, speak for myself.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's having a business that provides this energetic, you know, service and charging a fee for it and giving lots away. And, you know, we pay our employees really well. We pay them a living wage, higher than the average, a really good benefits plan. And that allows them to be relaxed, happy, joyous people. You know, they made more money than we did up until just recently, at least me. And that was just what it took to have a place where a subscriber can call and they're going through an evolutionary process. And sometimes they want to share the joy, and sometimes they're looking for a little guidance. And we have good people to help them. And different people on staff have different skill sets, and one person can help, another probably can. So that's really what it takes to run a business like this, where people are going through higher levels of consciousness, and it's not always comfortable. So if you don't have people there to help them, you're not in service. Like, you just can't sell something that's going to help people go up and not provide support, at least in our ethic.
I agree with you. You know, I've functioned as a spiritual guide for people for a long time. And one of my pet peeves are quote unquote spiritual teachers who will catalyze a powerful process for somebody, for a student, and then just basically take a laissez-faire, hands-off approach after that. We're like, hey, you're on your own now. You know, I always feel that if I'm going to consciously catalyze something for somebody, I want to be involved in managing that process for a while. So I appreciate that. Jeff, did you want to, I'm feeling like I want to call you in here.
Sure. Yeah, there's so much here. It's very deep and rich. You know, I'll just bring back to the business and the business structure a little bit, another piece that's brought a lot of joy and juice to the mission. I mean, we're very mission oriented, and the people that are coming into the business are as well. And one of the things we're doing, it's a new practice we call attunement, where we have a session with everyone in the business, and we do a little meditation, a little prayer, get us into space, and then we listen to how the business wants to express. So in our testing, we found that when a business is created with a positive purpose, that there's a consciousness created. You could call it an angel, you could call it what you like, but there is a consciousness there that is, I think as you put it, our expression into the world through business, like divinity's expression into the world through business, comes through this voice or this intelligence. And so we can tune into that, and it's probably whispering in our ears all the time, but so we're consciously attuning in these sessions where each person in the business listens, and then we go back around the circle and everyone can, whatever they either heard or saw, or they can pass, but, we get a sense of what's up for the business in the next quarter, like what wants to express in the world, what we need to do next. And so that's a process that we're doing on a quarterly basis, and everyone's attunement is part of it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I'm conscious of the time. I think we need to start to wind it down, but I feel very blessed to be a part of your work and to get to know both of you personally. And I have a feeling we'll have much contact and sharing as the years unfold. Is there anything either of you would like to say in closing before I formally close out the show for today?
I'd just like to say thank you, Dr. David, for this time together. It really has been rich, and grateful for this connection to your fans, people that follow you, and we're here on a mission, and we invite others to join us, and it's quite a journey together, and there's a lot of joy and possibilities. In fact, infinite possibilities.
Thank you, Jeff. Clayten?
Yes, I wanted to mention that today and in our last conversation, you asked some questions that only somebody who'd been doing this work for decades would know to ask. And we had the same experience with Regina. It was uncanny how they were able to tune in to the next steps of how the technology wants to express in the world. So you were, in fact, I think, doing an attunement, whether you call it that or not. I just wanted to acknowledge that and just appreciate your work, and that you're willing to make the effort to interview people like us and share it with the world. And even if it's not, as your son said, going to be economized, it's something that, that's what makes the world a better place, and we just find a way to give a little in our own way. So I see that in you, and I just appreciate that about you. Thank you.
Thank you, Clayten and Jeff. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to another edition of Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. David, the Cutting Edge Doc, and here on Freeing the Body, Freeing the Soul, we do in-depth interviews with individuals doing cutting-edge work in the areas of healing, spirituality, and social transformation. My very special guests today have been Clayten Steadman and Jeff Stegman, and they've been sharing about their wonderful work Some people call it Fluffy because the initials are FLFE and their URL is flfe.net. And I will put in the show notes and on the YouTube channel, I will put my special affiliate link so that if you do decide to explore the work, you're also supporting me and my work as well. So with that, we'll close with love and peace. Bye for now.
Ah, that was awesome.